share. Okay, starting with Google Maps. Here's little old Ventura, where I live and where I am based. I am constantly using maps to scout my photography. My mantra is always know as much about the site that I'm about to photograph as possible, so that I can know where the sun's coming up, where the sun's going down in relationship to the buildings and the trees, what obstructions I'm going to run into when I'm out there in the real world. And the best way I have found to do that is to immediately go to satellite view and start poking around Google and see what I'm getting into. Since most of my work is all over California and very little of my work is actually in Ventura, I'm not really in a position where I can drive to things. So as a typical situation, if you zoomed in on something in, let's see, City of Ventura City Hall here in Ventura, our big beautiful building, there's the roof. You zoom in. If you really start to zoom in, you'll see the trees get kind of clunky. And the further you zoom, and I'm not going to stop, we'll go back for questions. And the assumption is that you guys can rewind this if you want to see something faster or what I clicked on. You basically see that the palm trees don't really look like palm trees, and they are rendered through artificial intelligence at this stage when you're looking at Google. There's a button down here at the right-hand part of your screen, if you'll see my cursor. If I hit the 3D button, I get an AI version that has been put together by Google's servers and is running off of my graphics card using actually quite a bit of power. So I have a fast computer and a fast internet connection. Your mileage may vary in this particular case. So over here on the right-hand side, if the red dot or the red arrow is up, that is north. You click on these two side arrows, you can spin around, and that is generally how we are looking at buildings from the four sides. If I hit the command button, I can actually spin around. Because this is AI, it isn't really an actual photo taken from that angle. It's stitched together from multiple photos. And that can be useful, but for me, I'm usually looking for something that doesn't have trees that look like this. So back over here to the right-hand side, back to 2D. One of the features you might want to do, anytime you double click on this compass over on the right-hand side, it'll get you back up to true north. So anytime you want to maybe do a screen capture of something like this, and you want to use it as a map or put it into a historical report, or you may not want those labels. Well, it's hidden, but you can go here to the left-hand side menu, scroll down, and there is a button, hit that, labels go away. That now makes this a pretty viable map in order to screen capture. The way Google's and Bing's permissions are written, they pretty much allow you to use these photographs, these aerial photographs, for almost anything you want. Now, the people that don't buy that as a complete public domain approach are the National Park Service and the Library of Congress, who are my main clients when I'm doing Habs, Hare, and Hal's work. So what's happening in my world is I am actually going to the USGS and downloading large public domain TIFFs of most of my situations. But this is what I use for the initial scouting. And so if I do some quickie screen shares here, let's see how that's going to work. On a project I recently did in West Hollywood that was just written up in the Trust today, I did, let's see, this is the screen grab I did initially. This is the building we were photographing, the factory in West Hollywood. And it used to be the Mitchell Camera Factory. And so I did the screen grab so that I could, know where everything was, and also apply my dots as a key map as we were out in the field, as we were photographing. So here's the field map we produced from that. Just a quickie photograph that we took in the field. We put down dots on it so that they would be easy to see. And we put down the arrows. So this is on the parking garage of the Vons across the street. That's the first context view, et cetera, et cetera. Here's the front facade. These were all taken usually what happens is those were all taken on a day when it was an afternoon and the sun was coming from the west. And then we went back later and we did shots number 22, 23, and 24 in an early morning situation on a different day, because all of these facades on the east side were of course in shadow and we didn't want that. So this was a 2-day shoot from that standpoint, and the third day for the interiors. We then, because this was getting donated to the Library of Congress, had to go get USGS maps. And if I have time, I'll show you how to do that. You download these huge TIFFs. There's one of them, but it of course is cutting off my building, which is right here in this part of the building, right in half. So I had to also download the piece next to it, which is the other half of the building down here, and create a stitch in Photoshop of the entire neighborhood, including my building, which is here. We then cropped this USGS map, has a lot of resolution, and ended up with the final map that we delivered, which should be here. Field map, factory flat map. All right. You go into the client folder and show that to you. All right. See, you think you're prepared, and here's our final map. So this is what we then delivered. This is a cropped version of that public domain USGS map. And then we reordered all the photographs and dropped all these. And after the fact, we knew we could drop a compass into the middle of that neighboring parcel because there weren't any photo locations in that parcel. So the Library of Congress accepts this because it's a public domain map, and everybody's happy. So moving along back to Google Maps, let's use some examples. If we look at California Highway 1, here's a project that I photographed for HARE, but it is no longer, not yet available for HARE. Here's the Bixby Creek Bridge, famous bridge. And here's one of the problems with 3D from an AI. It makes a great skateboard ramp, but it makes a far less effective bridge, as you can see. And if you're familiar with Bixby Bridge, it's a pretty amazing clear span bridge. There's a shot of it. That's what it's supposed to look like, and not a skateboard ramp. So we have a couple different ways that we can go about that. When I initially went to this, I needed a 2D view, which again, down here on the right-hand side, hit the 2D button. It's still a little wonky because there's some of that AI stuff going on. And if I zoom in, it's a little clunky. This isn't so bad. This hasn't been rendered quite so badly. There's a little squirreliness. So there is a place, and if you go to the links that we have included, you can take a look at this, but there is you can just type into Google 2D versus 3D maps or other versions of Google Maps, and you will end up with this page. This page is basically allows you to click out of 3D mode. So right now I have it set so that when I view maps, it's viewing in 3D mode. If I hit this open maps in 2D mode, I'm hoping you guys can all see this on the screen, but anyway, there's a button here that says open maps in 2D mode. I'll now hit that. I get back to my mapping app. Everything looks the same at this point. It even looks the same when I click on an aerial. It really doesn't look any different. But if I go in here and I search California 1, I should get a much more bare bones 2D version of that. So let's go back to the Ventura City Hall, because we all looked at that earlier and we knew how bad the palm trees looked. Well, here's Ventura City Hall in 2D. You know, they're not great palm trees. Pardon me, palms. I'm gonna get myself in trouble there. But these trees are actually rendering as trees, whether they are palms or not. The problem here is you'll see down here in the right-hand corner, I don't have a 3D button. I cannot look at this from an angle. That is valuable data, and it's nice to have. So it's not without you know, some lack of value when you remove that from the equation. But this will give you a clearer, non-AI interfered raw aerial photograph of the area. Now you are relying on data that Google has purchased and licensed in order to put out into the world. It's usually spelled out here at the bottom. It is not always spelled out with the greatest accuracy. At the bottom here, you probably can't read it, but it says map data copyright 2021, map data copyright 2021. 3D Earth View is not available because I have turned that off. But we don't know if this was photographed in 2021 or if it was photographed in 2020 or 2017 or 2013. You know, we don't know what aerial flight or flyover they licensed. And every city has a slightly different flyover pattern. We have to remember that this is actually coming from photographs either in airplanes or in satellites, usually low flying airplanes doing flights in perfect grids so that those grids can be stitched together. And not every city is doing it at high resolution. Sometimes the camera is set with a much wider field and you don't get as much detail. Sometimes you're getting more detail. So that is one of the issues with Google, is that you don't get real, or it's very difficult to find their raw 3D data, which they use to build out their AI version of a 3D world. So you have this great flat data if you switch off 2D. So here again, I can go to the 2D and 3D. If you basically just go to Google Maps, you type into their help box, or you type in, how can I see are there other versions that I can use of Google Maps? It'll give you this page, which shows you where you can turn it on and off. Beyond that, if I go back in, there's also Street View. So Google has basically its typical map that you see. It's aerial maps that tend to be three-dimensional if you don't opt out of them. It's two-dimensional version if you dig into it. And then if you zoom in far enough, you get to Street View. Here's a street view on Dunning Street of two duplexes. These duplexes, the one on the left, if you can see that level of detail, has these fabulous casement windows made out of steel. And the one on the right has these not so fabulous vinyl windows, but yet they were built at the same time. Now, Google on the desktop, not on an iPad and not in any of the mobile applications, but Google Maps Street View will allow you up here on the left-hand side to go back in time. So what happens is you load a page. This is 3301 San Luis Street. So I will just go back to the very core Google Maps and we'll zoom in here. I'll type that address into Google Maps and go. There it is. And then I switch down here in the left-hand side from map to satellite. There I am, zooming in, zooming in. This is still in clunky 3D mode because I switched back. I have the ability to fly around if I want. But as I zoom in, at some point, I will get Street View. If your Zoom isn't working that way, the way to get Street View is to click on the little yellow man on the right-hand side. Now, most of you probably know this, and there's a whole lot of things I don't know, but you might pick up a piece or two. So if you take that little man and you drop him on any of the blue lines that appear when you're dragging him around, shake him up, drop him on that intersection, there's our intersection. Casements, no casements. Up here on the left-hand side, you'll see a tiny little timeline if this street has been driven by the Google van twice or 3 times. If you hit that timeline, which again does not show up on a phone or an iPad or a tablet, only on desktop, I now have 2011, April 2015, and April 2016. They drove down this street 3 times. So 2016 is the current view. If I click on this dot, I get a preview of April 2015 here. If I click on the window, I'll actually see this is what 2015 looked like. Everything's still pretty standard. If I go back to 2011, we can see this used to have casement windows as well. Now, what you'll find is the 2007, 2009, 2011 early views from Google tend to be really pixelated. They tend to have copyrights stamps on them and things like that. But they will give you a view into the past. And sometimes that is valuable. John's going to talk to you more about going further back into the past, but sometimes the only thing you need to do is just look back 10 years and see, when did that tree get cut down? When did that, building get enlarged? Did this happen recently? This is a good way to do it. All right, so those are the things that I'm doing on a general basis with Google. Aerials, using those a lot. If you want to do a screen capture, you can click on this and give yourself a whole wide screen to work from here. It's obviously not a Tmax native. Just like that. Now, Google's got some other features that I use a lot. In the case of the book that I did with Ken Bernstein, I actually took all of the addresses from Ken and dropped them into a Google map. And then, not everybody is comfortable with this kind of disclosure, but I opened my kimono, so to speak, to Google, and that I let Google track me all the time. Now, I'm pretty sure that they're tracking me all the time anyway, so I don't really think it's much, but you can take a look here. On September 6th, I drove down to Pan's Restaurant and also to Ports of Call Village. And this is because I allowed my phone to constantly drop pins as I drive along. And any day of the week, I can go back and say, hey, look, on September 17th, I didn't get out of Ventura, but on Thursday, September 3rd, there's a really good chance I went to LA because we were finishing up the book. Go back to July, we were pretty hot and heavy driving around LA. Let's see, Friday, July 24th, we are accessing the server. There was my LA day. Now, I was able to gather all of this data together and create a kind of a fun image at the end of my project with Ken, where we actually took a look at, whoops, where's Ken's thing here? You always think you have everything ready. So yeah, here's the travel map of all of my drives to LA to photograph for that book. Unfortunately, it didn't fit in the book, but it will be in my PowerPoint. So if you ever see a PowerPoint talking about the book, I spent a lot of time. There were about 300 sites, a little over 300 sites to photograph down there. And basically, all of those days of driving can be exported as KMLs, and then they can be dropped into any number, either Google Earth or Google Maps, and you can color them anything you want. So every day I colored it slightly different color, and that is the general driving. It's not super accurate, and it's not meant to be super accurate, but it definitely gives you a good idea of what you were doing that day, any day in the past, as long as you're willing to, allow Google to track you. If you're having battery problems with your phone, it is going to use extra battery. It's going to use some bandwidth. I have an unlimited plan, and when I'm in the car, the phone's on a dash charger, so I wasn't draining it as I was driving. So, the other feature in Google that I was able to use was Ken's, we created a My Map, or I created a My Map with all of the locations that we shot, all 300 of them. And so at any time I could click on it and find, here's Sound City. I then ran an iPad in the car, and I would look into the location, hit Google Maps on my phone, hit the microphone and say, hey, 15456 Cabrito Road, and give me directions. And then I would drive to that next site. So a lot of the things you can do with Google. Then there's Bing. Now, Bing is generally the redheaded stepchild of that. But if we're going to go into Bing Maps, we can do the exact same thing. Let's say, for instance, we want to, well, let's go back to Google for just 1 second. If I want to search for the Miles C. Bates house, which happens to be the Wave House in Palm Desert, there it is, Miles C. Bates house. Google's that smart. If I go into Bing's Maps and I type in Miles C. Bates house, nada. All right, so I actually have to go into our links here, which I have the Miles C. Bates house's actual address on Santa Rosa Way. All right, now we can find it. So here's a typical Bing situation. The map shows up like this. Up here is the place where you, in the right-hand corner, road, aerial, or street side. If you hit aerial, there's the aerial. It is not a fantastic aerial, and it doesn't allow you to zoom very far. Another thing that I don't like is when you can't get rid of this little information on the thing that you want to look at. So even if you turn off labels, the one thing that stays is that little dot. So we're going to move up the block a little, and then we won't have that problem. And then I can turn off that one. All right, so that's as much as I can zoom in there. Not ideal, but the beauty of Bing is that it has this up in the left-hand side, bird's eye, and also their own version of street side. And if you click on bird's eye, the beauty is this is true 45-degree angle oblique aerial photography. Now, again, down in the right-hand corner, it's telling you this is Microsoft data from 2021, but it's not, because this addition to the building has already been removed and the building's been restored. You know, I can fly around it. I have only 4 options to fly around it because these are true photographs. I don't get to create a system where the AI is telling me what I can do. But it's really valuable data, and it's a different set of obliques than we're getting out of Google. There is a Google Earth program, moving right along, that is a beta for online, uses a lot of bandwidth, uses a lot of computer power. But if you have those things at your desk, you can use Google Earth and you'll get a similar version to what you have in Google Maps. And this is also the same rendering you'll get from Google Maps. If you are operating on an Apple computer, Apple has a app called Apple Maps. It is not online, so if you're on a PC, you're just out of luck. But if you're on Apple, here is Apple Maps version of Bixby Bridge. Not horrible, but yet it's a different aerial photograph. And if you're trying to layer your knowledge of a place and figure it out and see it in different light, all of these overflights were taken at different times and usually in different years. Again, there's no data on the bottom of this to tell me when it was flown, so I have to do some guesses. Sometimes you can do that by looking at different elements in the photograph and what is and what isn't. But that is what you can get from Apple Maps. Then there's also a site called CalTopo, and all of these links are in our thing. CalTopo has a set of maps that you can look at. This is an NAIP, and I wish I knew what that stood for, overlay. It is not super resolution, so if I zoom in, you'll see it gets kind of clunky. And then they also have a layer of global imagery mapping. And it just so happens the day they flew over that, there was a big foggy cloud. So that doesn't always work for you. Cool thing about CalTopo is if you spend the extra money and subscribe like I did this morning, you can actually go in and look at weekly data. So here's the weekly data. This is the last flyover on 2/1/2021. I can go back a week to 1/20. Now, granted, this is probably more useful if you're looking at large areas. And I can only go back to 2017 here, but I can go back to 2017 basically week by week. So that can be handy in some situations. MapQuest, does anybody use MapQuest anymore? Well, MapQuest does have aerial photos. Sometimes they're better than others. So here we're back in Santa Rosa Road, typical MapQuest looking map. If you go over here to the right under this little tiny globe, it's not obvious, but that's satellite. And you can zoom in to the wave house, and you can't zoom in very far. But again, if we are just trying to gather data and see how a site looks in different light, it's nice to have different options to go looking. So, you know, a lot of times I'm sitting here in my office, and rather than drive there and wait 24 hours to see what the sun does, I can take 10 minutes and look at the different ways it has been shot over the years. This particular address, I copy and drop it into CalTopo. For instance, gives me a kind of clunky aerial under the NIAP layer. And these are available under the free, but if I go to global imagery, man, I get a smoking, probably the best and sharpest and closest up, and I didn't see this data anywhere else. Now again, here at the bottom, it tells me it's copyrighted and that it maybe is 2019 data, or that was the last time they copyrighted it. Obviously, this isn't 2019 because in 2019, this edition was gone. So I don't trust the fact that there's a date on the bottom corner of the imagery, because that's not necessarily the case. Because if you want to know what the Miles C. Bates house looks like right now, you can go to Street View and see, maybe you'll get lucky. And let's see here, we'll take the little man, we'll drop him in front. No, this is still an older shot. Now, when I was in Palm Springs for Modernism Week, now 2 years ago, almost, I went and photographed this building because it had been restored and was on the tours, and I got there and there were no cars parked in front, which for a photographer is a really super big deal. And so sometimes you can go down here into the left-hand corner of the screen and it'll show photos. Here's all the photos of this site that Google has on their map. That's what the building looks like now, pretty amazing. If I go back, there's also a Street View and 360 button. Now, when I was there, I was able to take this 360-degree view standing in the middle of the street and post it for public use. There's my truck in the background, and there's me, look at that. But more importantly, there's the building straight on. And I wasn't using a sophisticated camera. I was using my little tiny iPhone at the time, and you'll see there's some problems with it. But if you want to see what the Miles C. Bates house looks like from the street while you're sitting at your desk, this is now a publicly viewable image that I've posted, and you all can do it. So obviously, if you're researching things, you can always go to the Historic American Building Survey site, type in that site, see if there's any photographs of them. You can go to Flickr, type into the search bar what you want to see. Is it Bixby Bridge? And then let's do that real quick. And then you can also say, all right, up here on the left-hand side, any license, let's drop that down to all Creative Commons, which means you can use it in your reports and things like that because people have given permission. Still quite a few images that you could use in a report. And then sometimes I use the little trick where, oops, where is it? Look at black and white images, and then that will sometimes narrow you into historic photos, which are pretty fabulous. So here's a historic photograph. Again, I wouldn't trust it just because this person has said it's in the public domain. did that person really own this photograph and take this photograph? Maybe not. So moving right along. Wanted to talk about Google Maps and that little 3D rendering thing. So I think I have time here. No, I'm out of time. Let me show you this quick video, and then you guys can ask some questions at the end. This is a 13-second video I made yesterday that shows you how easy it is to use the Google Street View app on your phone and take one of those 360-degree photographs. So here's me yesterday. This is a time lapse of about a minute in time taking a photograph in 360 degrees. And that's it, done. I posted it a minute later. And if you go to Google Maps and Cafe Zac, you will be able to see in here, hopefully, photos. Little man in front. So here's 360-degree photos. And it doesn't really show that there's a photo there that somebody posted for free. Mine isn't showing yet. No. It's here. Yeah, here's the one I shot yesterday. So that little tiny video, this is what it rendered. It's not perfect. It's got issues, but this was taken in a few seconds. And there's the camera that was filming me do it. Literally took me a minute, and then it was posted in a minute. And then I did one in the backyard because they gave me lunch. So that's always nice, free lunch. There's the Cafe Zac in the backyard. 300. They have a really nice patio, so I recommend them highly, and it was delicious. I had a beet salad. Anyway, not relevant. Moving along, I'm going to turn it over to John, I think, and hopefully we're all good. How did that work? Did I miss anything?
Worked great.
Okay. Fast and furious.
You covered a lot in a quick amount of time. So
the assumption is that you all have the rewind button, which is a throwback to when tapes were actually going backwards. But we can all go back and forth and freeze frame if you want to see those links. And we have a very detailed link doc that we'll be going with this, where you have all of these docs, the 2D, the 3D, the Google, you name it, it's in there. So take it away, John.
Okay, so I have about 10 minutes here. I'm going to move as quickly as I can, and I'll try to talk quickly, but not too quickly. So my part of this presentation will really look at how to take archival images, old topo maps, old sandboard maps, things like that, and make use of them as best as you could. The story really starts when I was in high school, actually. I was probably one of the youngest users of ArcView GIS program in my county, or maybe even the state. And I helped the BLM do a mapping application for a historic ditch in Douglas County, Oregon, on the National Register of Historic Places. So this has been something that I've actually been interested in for 30 years. But it's something that has never been a career of mine, but just a side interest. That's me crawling out of an abandoned mining tunnel when I was 16 years old. I do not recommend doing this. It's just something that sort of sparked my interest in mapping and mapping applications. As many of you may know, on topo maps, old mining tunnels are marked as Y symbols. So if you're ever interested in checking out old mining tunnels, you'll find a Y on an old topo map. So first we'll start from the sky and start out with the really big maps, and then move down into smaller and smaller looks from the sky. As many of you know, the sandboard maps are probably the best, most detailed maps that you can find as historians. I just wanted to give you a few options, ways of finding these. You'll find that USGS has historical topo maps online right now. In a minute, we'll take a look at all of those. There's Sanborn maps that are now scanned by the Library of Congress. So I'll click on this link here. Hopefully it'll work. Right here is a Sanborn map from my hometown of Richmond, California. And it's amazing how much they have put into scanning the smallest details of these. And they're now downloadable as full res TIFFs and JPEGs. So you can download them in uncompressed version. And these of course are pre-copyright. So before 1920 something, everything is public domain. So these are free to use as far as I understand. The full color Sanborns, as you probably know as historians, they're much more useful in analyzing buildings because they actually are color coded based on the material used for the building. So it kind of gives you an idea of what things are made of in a certain area. This is the historic Pullman shop in Richmond. Okay, going back. Today we're going to look at a few other websites, but also Google Earth, and I'll show you a little more of how to make best use of Google Earth in your efforts. The first two that we'll look at is the USGS mapping tools. I have two links here that are also included in that Google Doc. You'll notice the Living Atlas from USGS is an older sort of application, an older platform. Somebody mentioned in the chat box that they wanted me to look up the Glendale Hospital. I hope this is the correct one that they were born in. But I looked it up, found the address for it, looked it up using the USGS tool, and you'll see here on the bottom, a list of various maps that are available. These are topo maps, USGS historical topos. They go as far back as the 1890s. So that just kind of shows you how detailed we could get. When you run your mouse over each of these, you'll notice that there's a indicator on what the level of detail is for that map. This is 1/62,500, which is not incredibly detailed, but better than most older maps. You'll see here, you can see the road layout at that time. But then as you go forward by 1928, you have a 1/24,000 map, and the hospital there is laid out in great detail. And it kind of shows you the drive that goes up there through the canyon and right around that little circle roundabout. And then of course you can go up to modern times. This is the Pasadena USGS topo from 1995. And you'll see that that site has significantly changed. The drive has moved. Used to be, or it looks like there's a marking for the sanitarium here. And there's a symbol for what looks like maybe a religious building of some type. So there's your USGS historical topographic map explorer. The second option I wanted to show people was the USGS Topo View, which is a newer platform, but the benefits of using the old one is you can use the transparency slider to sort of cycle between the old and the new to see how things change. And you'll see how significantly those freeways have changed the landscape and how significantly the hospital has changed in terms of its layout. But the newer link is also much more useful for downloading maps. So we'll go to the newer link here. Somebody else mentioned Yosemite. So let's see if I could find Yosemite Valley. And here is the Yosemite Village, which I'm assuming is what they're trying to find here. You'll notice on the right-hand bar, there's a series of different links that you could click on. You'll notice there's a lot more available here on this website, especially in the lower scales of 1/24,000. And you could filter on the top here by the scale. So you click on the scale here for 24K, then you select the maps that you'd like. It looks like there's not any historic maps at that level. So try 48 or 63. There's one that goes back to 1956 here. So you click on show. And there's Yosemite Village in 1956. You could download the other benefit of the TopoView platform is you could download the files in their full resolution. So here's your JPEG version, your TIFF version. download it as a KMZ or even a PDF. Going back to our slides here. So some people are really interested in Google Earth Pro. Now, Shafe was showing you Google Maps, which is a browser-based way of navigating maps. Google Earth Pro is a desktop-based piece of software. And even though it's an older piece of software, it used to be a very expensive piece of software. People paid hundreds of dollars a month, I think, to use it. So, and now the benefit is that it's available for free to anyone. Now, some things we're going to look at as quickly as we can here is how to go back in time in Google Earth Pro, how to add historic map layers to Google Earth Pro, how to import and export files in Google Earth Pro, and how to use Google Earth Pro for aerial drone surveys, which I'll try to go over quickly. So going into Google Earth Pro here, we're looking at downtown San Francisco, but you'll notice there's some odd map here below it. I can disable that, and then it shows you downtown with all of the three-dimensional buildings here. You can get a nice straightforward view of the Embarcadero Center and the hotel there, the whole sort of waterfront. But the benefit of Google Earth Pro is that you can take your own maps, your own images, lay them down, and then say you want to remove the 3D buildings and the terrain, and you have a three-dimensional view with a historic overlay on it. So this is the buried ships of Yerba Buena Cove in San Francisco. This shows you exactly where the old ships were. So here's the Rome, here's the Apollo, the Niantic, which is one of the most famous ones. And it shows you where the waterfront was in 1906 when that earthquake occurred. You could also take the map here, the buried ships map, and click on properties. And when you click on properties, there's an option here, a slider for transparency. So you can slowly move that transparency over and see exactly where these ships were in terms of where the modern buildings are and where they were historically. So another quick view is just to show you an example of what else can be done is we're looking at a sugar mill here in Colorado. With Google Earth, you can shift, you can look at a different view using the shift button. So you just hold the shift button down and then move up and down to move at a different perspective. As I mentioned earlier, you can use the transparency to look at what the historic and modern differences were. So there's a modern building, the old Great Western Sugar Mill in Longmont, Colorado. And then you just move it over and you can see this is the Sanborn map of the same building. Shows you all the details, the materials, where the different functions of this factory were. So that's how you do an overlay in Google Earth. Also, there's another option that people should know about. Going back to Yosemite here. Here's the Yosemite Valley. You can go back in time. So at the top of your screen, you'll notice there's a clock symbol. It says show historical imagery, use the time slider to move between acquisition dates. You can click on that. Here's an image from 2017. You can click the left arrow to go back a couple of years. Here's an image from 2015. Some of these go as far back as the 1940s. Unfortunately, with Yosemite, the furthest back we can go, it looks like, is 1987. But if you go to my hometown of Richmond here, those of you who know Richmond, is that you probably know that Richmond is a historic shipbuilding town at one point. And a lot of these old shipways are right there and right there. You can go all the way back to 1939 on this view. And none of the shipbuilding facilities were there at that point. You have the old chemical processing plant there that's next to where the Berkeley Field Lab is. This is where the current dry dock is, general warehouse for the Kaiser yards. But this allows you to just move forward and back throughout time to any period, as much as there is historic imagery available. So that's a useful tool for Google Earth. What else did I not cover? Let's see here. Going back. Importing and exporting. I won't go too much into detail into that, but under the file menu, you'll find an option to open. You can open any file that's either a KML or a KMZ. Those are pretty standard formats for most mapping applications. You can export or import into KML or KMZ. And then you can also import using this button, or save as a KMZ or KML. If you want to organize multiple places, you just keep them in a folder like this. You can have many thousands. Unlike the online version of Google, the desktop version doesn't limit you to the number of waypoints you can create. So you just keep them in a folder, then you right click on that folder, and then you can save place as, and that saves it as a KMZ or KML. KMZ is just a zipped version of a KML. Now, there's other open source tools out there. One of the more useful applications is for looking at change over time. Here is a tool that was used using Mapbox, and on the doc link that we sent you, you'll find some other tools, including Leaflet and OpenStreetMaps and some of these other tools. These will allow you to create your own applications. This application actually looks at the building stock over time, so you can slide that slider to the right or left, and it shows you changing buildings over time, when buildings were built in a city, where they were built when. Finally, in the 1 or 2 minutes I have here, just wanted to quickly go over how easy it is to create aerial surveys using a consumer type drone. It's not very expensive. I've gone over this before in past CPF programs, but for those of you who weren't there, this is the quick 2-minute version. So using a drone is quite easy. You just have to have a drone. That the typical consumer one that can do this type of processing is only about $300 now. You could use these helper tools, including Litchi, the DJI Flight Planner, and Google Earth to plan your flights. And then, of course, if you're going to be doing this for commercial purposes, you should get Part 107 training. I myself am a Part 107 trained drone operator. It's really not incredibly difficult. And in the link that we sent you, you can find some training tools and training sites. And then finally, to stitch those images together and create your 3D model, you just need to use the right kind of software. You can use Pixd 4D, Drone Deploy, Agisoft, or any of these other types of programs out there. The cost, as I mentioned, could be quite low, but they could also be quite high depending on what level of detail you want. Now, planning your flight is pretty easy because you have these tools out here now. I'm going to click a link here that shows you a flight plan. So here is a basic flight plan of the Richmond General Warehouse. The flight plan has a height of 38 meters, and it goes in a grid over the top, just in a sort of back and forth pattern. It takes a photo every couple of seconds. If you want to explore that flight plan in Google Earth, you just click under here under missions and then export as a 3D path and open that file. And the beauty of that is that you can zoom in and then do your oblique and view the height of the image. And then when you turn on the terrain and turn on 3D buildings, that'll show you the actual height of some of these structures. So here's the General Warehouse at its height. That way you can plan a flight without crashing into the warehouse, which is always nice.
Good plan.
And so there's how you plan a flight in Google Earth using a drone. Okay, so I want to move forward as quickly as I can here. Just one final mention is grids versus orbits. Now, the flight plan I just showed you for that drone over the General Warehouse, that was a grid flight plan. Then you want to do a second flight around the object in a circle, and that is to take a 45-degree, just like the bird's eye images that Shafe showed you. You want to take a 45-degree angle of the building, and ideally another third orbit that kind of takes a straight-on 90-degree kind of angle. Here's a time lapse of me documenting the historic Alameda portal of the Webster Tube on the Alameda side. That just shows you what is being taken during an orbit flight plan. So you're just snapping a photo every 2 seconds as you fly around the building. And then you take that and you convert it into a 3D image, 3D photogrammetric image using any of the off-the-shelf sort of software platforms out there. This is Pix4D, shows you where all of the images were taken in the sky. And then it turns it into a point cloud. And just to quickly show you an example of some models. If you go to the link in the document, you'll see more of these, but this is a historic neon sign for the Cafe Sahara. This is just me navigating around using the 3D model. So this isn't images. This is just like the AI that Shafe was talking about. And it does have some sort of messy points where it's not exact, but it is much better than Google is able to do because they're much higher resolution images. Here's the historic West Berkeley Cal ink factory, now certainly currently abandoned. There are hopefully plans to turn that into sort of housing. And then we'll jump forward here. And here's the a gravel processing plant in Berkeley. The other one I wanted to show you because it kind of shows you the abilities to do large scale landscape. This is a historic mining facility way out east of near Mono Lake. But it shows you how large of a landscape you can cover and do things like cultural landscape reports with these kinds of tools and mark out the exact locations of various buildings and things like that. So I don't want to go too much into detail. I'm happy to share the slides with everybody, but I think we should jump into the questions.
Okay. Thank you, John. That was a lot of information. I could barely keep up, but I really thought that you did get a lot of comments. We don't have that many questions. So if you are listening, you can go ahead and post your question right now. I saw one question which is what would you describe, John, the difference between Google Earth versus Google Earth Pro?
So maybe Shafe can offer something on this too, but my sense is I prefer to use Google Earth because it relies on the processing power of your computer more than the cloud-based kind of assets that you find in Google Maps. So whenever you load Google Maps, it's trying to use the internet connection that you have to load images and resources. But with Google Earth, it actually caches all those images and files, and it runs much more quickly. So somebody mentioned that they were having speed issues with Google Earth. One way to solve that is to use Google Earth Pro, download it, and run it from your desktop instead of online. And that should solve the issue for a lot of people.
And it looks like somebody had their cat jumping on their keyboard in our Q&A. It just goes. A real question from Marina is, how exactly do you add a historic image to Google Earth? That's what I was interested in. So if I'm taking photographs of something and or not even historic, but how you did it, Shafe, I will go back and watch the video, it's slower version. But it seems like that is a really great way for all of us sort of, preservationists and people out there in the world to add to this database of images.
Yeah, so to add for the historic maps, you can go into add photo or image overlay. I think image overlay is what people are looking for here. And you'll see a blank green space here. And then you select your image. I'm just going to select a random map image from my desktop here. Let's see, the Sanborn map here. It's a big image, so it might take a little bit to load. And then you click OK.
I think you should lay in Ken Bernstein's headshot. That would be nice.
We'll put him, we'll put him in LA somewhere where he usually is. And then once that image loads, you'll see here that it's obviously not geo-referenced. It's not in a place where it was historically. So you have to find where that place is first, then drop in the image. Then use the transparency tool right here to kind of move the image around in its correct cardinal direction, north-south. And then also sort of, if you need to, move it up and down, downsize it, shrink it, whatever you need to do until it's ready. And then it's finally sort of in its geo-referenced place. That's how I would do it in Google Earth.
Well, they say that Los Angeles covers many square miles. So we could actually have Ken covering many, many square miles.
I think we need almost like a workshop, John, when we could just go step by step and people can follow along. So Dennis had a question about copyright restrictions. Can you two maybe talk about that? I know you had said something, Stephen, about things that are public record.
Well, I went back and forth with the National Park Service and the Library of Congress at the beginning, saying, hey, look, I've gone as far as I can go without talking to a human being at Google, which is technically impossible, to find out what their permissions are. And their permissions are generally, you can use our you can use Google's maps and their aerial surveys and all that stuff for anything you want. If it's up on our site, you use it. You know, just take a screenshot, yippee-ki-yay. You can put it in a book, you can do whatever. The National Park Service has said, well, they're not giving you a rights transfer into the public domain. They're saying you can use it anywhere. And so we're not going to accept that as a public domain image. And so therefore you're going to have to go to the USGS site, which is actual government imagery, and drop, you know, one of those images into your world. And, you know, if anybody wants to hang around or call me, I can tell them, I can walk them through that. But I tried to walk them through all of the steps to click around the USGS site in that document that is our link document. So if you're interested in doing that, you'll end up downloading these really big TIFFs. Inevitably, those seams of the TIFFs will be right on the building that you want. So, you know, in my world, I can take Photoshop and merge those two images and then take a slice of that and use that, you know, and then I tell everybody where I found it and what the map reference was and when it was flown, because all of that information is on the USGS site. But technically nothing else, unless, like John said, it is, unless it is something that is older than 1927, it's not necessarily public domain. So, sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the other thing that Shaith mentioned was that the government sources, no matter what it is, you can use NASA imagery, you can use USGS, that's all public domain. So there are places to turn to for those sources. Obviously, the best imagery is now commercial, but there's places to turn to find those kinds of images. And also the topo maps, I think, are incredible resources for all of us, and they're public domain.
If anybody wants a quick 1 minute, do we have a minute? Yeah,
Sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
1 minute.
Go ahead.
Yeah, 1 minute tutorial. If you can see me, I've got my old iPhone 6 here. I have basically, let's see how well that works. All right, not that well. This is the Street View app, which I downloaded for free from Google. I'll push that. I'm not very good at that. And it opens up Google, see that little tiny yellow dot on the bottom? That's a camera symbol. Don't try this at home. You hit that little camera symbol, it'll ask you 3 questions. Do you have take photosphere, import 360-degree photos, or link external 360-degree camera? To do it right, you link a 360-degree camera via Bluetooth. To do it the way I did it, you basically push that little button. I don't know if you can see, but it will take a picture every time that orange dot is in the center. And that's how you do a sphere. And it's that easy. So don't be intimidated, except if you're trying to do it backwards, it's hard. And then it'll guide you to take that photograph, which I can't see, up there. Oh, this is really hard backwards. Click. So it creates a stitch, and then it it doesn't even upload it. I tried this offline yesterday. It does eat your battery like crazy. Come on, baby. I just don't know what I'm doing. Anyway, you get the idea. And then the phone will actually stitch those together, and it is up to you if you want to make that privately or publicly available. Give people a link, or just put it out into the world like I did with the Wave House. And this is not the most sophisticated as a 4-year-old phone with a single lens, doesn't take anything. The slower you go and the more careful you are, obviously, the better your results. And get out there and make history.
Steven, did you say what app that was? Was that a specific app that you're
Actually,
using?
Google Street View is a separate app than Google Maps. And it gives you the street view of anything and any address in America, basically on the planet, that has been driven, or somebody has hiked it with a Google camera, because all of the public trails have Google views, and then some of the interiors of buildings and everything that the public has uploaded. Like the one that I uploaded the other day. It does not give you that little tiny clock that allows you to go back in time and see if people have cut down trees or built built things on their property in the last 10 years. So you have to go to the desktop of Street View in order to do that.
Great. Did you want to take another question, John?
Well, I could quickly answer some. There's a few here that I can answer very quickly. Somebody asked, what about the legal restrictions for drones? If you're a consumer doing it for non-commercial purposes and you're doing it in an area that doesn't have restricted drone usage, there are online tools that allow you to look up where you can't fly. There's no limitations. You just have to stay under 300 feet, stay within 300 feet of the ground. And if you want to use it for commercial purposes, all you have to do is get a Part 107 certification. That's it.
And then how
Nothing like
about this? How about this? I'm looking to save homes in the South. How about helping in California? Well, we are here for you, Juliana. I really think that this is so much information, and we got a couple of people, including Andrew, who say we need to have sort of a step-by-step workshop where we just, I think workshop happy hour, and we're all on here and just like, you know, experimenting with different addresses we're trying to find. I really like the transparency, how you could see through time. And using other computer apps, you'd be able to record that as a video, which I think would be great, John, like where you were showing with the ships. You could actually record that kind of fading in and fading out. And then you could show that in a PowerPoint or any kind of a meeting that you needed to use. We got to close up pretty soon. Did you two want to answer any more questions?
Let me see if I can show you one quick piece of data before we all have to go away. If I can find it fast enough. Movies. So I did a documentation video for 1500 Mission Street, and let's hope it's in here. And let's see if it runs. Share my screen. How do I share my screen? Where's that button? Darn it. There it is. Share screen, desktop, share. Let's see if this works. Oh, take a second. This intro to this little documentary, where is it? Come on, baby. Was literally taken from the beginning of Google Maps, where it starts in the middle of nowhere. Let's see how this goes. That's not working. Well, you're getting the idea. So give it a minute. 7, 9, come on. Anyway, it's this very, very fast intro here. That is a animation that is 100% out of Google Maps.
Yeah.
And then we faded to the drone video. All right, done. So anyway, I just wanted to show you that you can actually use that. And that was, yes, that was me as a narrator, not my best work. But thanks.
Well, I also wanted to mention that you can do that in Google Earth Pro as well, where you set up a tour and you can fly from location to location and set sort of like macros that automatically run. So that functionality is available in Google Earth Pro to create a video from a tour of a site. You know, any other important pressing questions? Or
I think the last one that you could maybe just address with one is that somebody mentioned, how do you find old roads? And then somebody else asked if there are high-res versions of 19th century maps of ranchos anywhere.
Oh, yeah, 19th century is anything before 1890s. I haven't seen too many maps of, other than very large scale, wider areas. But then you might want to check out the David Rumsey map collection online. That's a very good resource for 1900. But the topos in general are the best resources. And then old roads, usually what I do to find old roads is look on the topos first. And then like we were showing you earlier, is kind of fly through time, look at different age periods and use the transparency tool to see where those roads moved. And then find it, take the coordinates, the decimal coordinates of that location where that road is, and punch that into Google Earth or Google Maps, and that'll show you where that old road was.
Great. This is wonderful. If you want to put that in the chat, John, that the link to that. And then I saw that John has already posted in the chat that you can leave your feedback for this this event. And we appreciate that. Maybe and give
take
suggestions.
a photograph. I got to take a photograph.
Oh yeah. Okay, Shafe, take our picture.
I'll take a screenshot too here.
While he's doing that, I
Yeah,
wanted
okay.
to remind everyone that we have another program coming up on Tuesday with Palm Springs. It's free and we're going to be having a great old time. You can, ready, Shay?
Hi there.
And you can sign up on our website as usual, californiapreservation.org. It's going to be fun. It'll be a nice break. And you can experience Modernism Week virtually with all of us, Mark Davis, William Kopek, and our favorite author, Alan Hess, the godfather of Googie. There'll be all of us will be here on Tuesday at noon. So join us then. And John, you got anything else?
Nope. Just a reminder, I pasted the link to next Friday's program, which is very related to this one today. So people were asking for a longer workshop on this. You
Mhm.
have the opportunity to attend next Friday's program. It is paid, but it comes
Oh,
with
that's true.
continued ed units.
That's
So
true.
look into that. And that's, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, John. And the recording will be available. We had a lot of requests about that. The recording will be available on Facebook as soon as it's over. It posts automatically, and then we'll post it on YouTube as well.
Remember, just take a pencil and stick it in the little wheel and rewind the tape, and then you can watch it over and over. No problem.
That's great advice. Great advice. All
Okay.
right. Well, do I get to be the bad guy and turn
Yep,
all
you're
this
the
off?
bad guy now, John.
All right, I'm going to turn my video off. I'm not going to close the room until everybody has a chance to click on those links in the chat box, but everybody else is welcome to leave when you're done doing all that. And thank you all for your time today.
All right,
Yeah.
thanks, Shay.
All right.
Bye.